Level Up Your Gym podcast number 1. And I thought it would be very appropriate to take it right back to the beginning and explain how and the lessons I learned when I started my first gym. But first, I want to mention the resources we have for you. Just give me 10 seconds here, levelupyourgym.com. We have our video series that hits your inbox every day. It is free. It's like a gym business masterclass condensed into bite-sized emails each morning for you. And you can get that at levelupyourgym.com. Okay, so let's get started. Now, if you're watching this on one of our YouTube channels or Facebook and not just listening, you'll see that I'm standing in the workshop. And if you're just listening to it like a podcast, you'll know that the sound quality has probably got a little echo to it. It's not one of those fancy podcast studios. And the reason is during the pandemic, and we have 2 fancy built-out podcast studios, so I can do these sort of things for our local gyms because I'm running them at the same time as I'm doing the Level Up Your Gym project and podcast. And the pandemic hit, and I'm going to spend the time at home as much with my family and appreciating them and my kids as much as possible. And that leads me to be here in my workshop shooting a podcast for you. And ironically, that is sort of how we started the company. We realized things weren't perfect. We couldn't buy a building or get into renting a space. So we simply had to ship our product when we were ready. And I am ready to share this information with you. So here's the story, and I'm going to give you the 3 resources. But first, if you're watching this, I dedicate this board. I dedicate this podcast to my wife, Mel, for letting me do a lot of wild things in my life. And I'm going to dedicate each podcast to a different person, a lot of gym owners that have influenced me and lessons that they've taught me. Each podcast is going to be just about 10 minutes long, and I'm going to try to focus on teaching 3 things in each episode. Unless it's a question and answer episode, we might go a little bit longer. But here's the story. I was teaching high school, and my father had passed away recently. He had a lot of health issues. He was a heavy smoker. He did not take care of himself. He was just in his early 50s. His father had passed away when he was in high school. I never met him. And we had this long history of unhealthy males in my family. And I wanted to do something about it. I wanted to change the legacy and live a longer and healthier life for my family. And I also wanted to help others do the same. Moms and dads need more time with their kids. And that was my motivation to start my gym business. And I didn't have a lot of background in business. At the time, I was teaching high school economics, so I understood finances. But we didn't have a lot of time, or we definitely didn't have a lot of time, but we didn't have a lot of money either. My wife and I just got married. That's why I'm dedicating this episode to her. But we just got married, and we bought a duplex because we could use the rent on half of it to help pay our mortgage and live in the other half. So in half of a duplex basement is where we started our original Synergy Athletics gym. Now, I didn't have a lot of startup capital either. This was my first year teaching high school. I just got out of college and had that debt. And so what we decided to do was sell my prized possession. My father and I, throughout high school, had remodeled a 1969 Camaro. He had purchased it out of a junkyard, and the deal was if I got money to go to college, I went to Colgate University and got football money, that he would provide me with a vehicle. Now, his idea of providing me with a vehicle was grab one out of the junkyard, and it took us 4 years to fix it, so we never actually got to drive it in college. And by the time we were almost done, he passed away. And so I drove it down the road and back once, and I knew that this was an investment in my family, my future, and the legacy of people that we were going to be able to help. So I decided to list it for sale. Drove it once. We sold it right around $6,500, and that's all the money that I had to go into our first gym. And that's all I needed, because the first thing out of our 3 lessons I learned when I was starting is, number 1, gotta be resourceful. We bought some used dumbbells. We bought some rubber mats from Tractor Supply that had a sale on them. We bought a couple small pieces of garage equipment. Some I still have, kind of home grade power rack, because I knew that not many people were going to be using it. We got some used weights from a garage sale, and we kind of band-aided this little gym together, but we kept it clean and we loved it. And I think that came across to the first few members. So my first tip and something I learned is be resourceful and be respectful of your investment. I've seen gym owners that like to spend a lot of money on the fanciest line of equipment but they haven't had a single member yet. And they go so hard into these, well, we need this fancy bar and we need this and that. All that stuff is nice and it's luxury equipment. Not talking down on it. We have some of that stuff now. Some of it we were learning how to like hand make at the beginning, which I would not recommend for liability reasons. But you got to be resourceful and you got to have the value of the money. And here's the big caveat. People are going to come to your gym or facility for your training, not your equipment. It's how you make them feel during a workout and how important they are and the results you get them, and not whether you have the fanciest dumbbell or the fanciest piece of cardio equipment. You need to keep that in mind. Instead of spending $30,000, $40,000, one of our gyms that we built out was a $50,000 up front because it was a much bigger 10,000 square foot space and flooring gets expensive. Yeah, you can get that stuff down the road, but don't do it up front. Be more resourceful and have more confidence in your own personal abilities to deliver the service at a high level. That's what people are paying for, not the equipment. So that's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 I learned, community. You probably weren't an expert Facebook marketer. You probably weren't buying ads in magazines or on TV or on radio shows right out the bat. You had to learn how to get members. Now, how we did it is we ran a football clinic because I had the football background at a discount. And we got a lot of kids to join the football class. And at the end of the clinic, it was a 3-day. Myself and some old teammates from college and local athletes got together and did it more as a community building event. We offered the kids and parents an opportunity to come in and train with me in my, what I thought was luxurious, but it's my garage gym. And we got our first 5 members. And it was all word of mouth. And during the first few years that when I speak and consult for most gym owners, they'll tell me that their marketing is word of mouth. And that's where it should start because that's how you sharpen your skills, by learning and asking for that community value. And still today, as our company has grown over 7 figures and we have our multiple locations, our number one thing is always community engagement and being more proactive about getting measurable referrals, which we'll talk about in later podcasts, than just saying word of mouth. But you have to kind of cut your teeth on getting community being remarkable, as in they'll go remark to their friends about you and getting them in, giving them an opportunity to bring their friends in. But you have to work on your internal community for them to feel a part of something. You never want your gym or facility to be a commodity, as in something they can buy anywhere, like an apple. If I go to one grocery store and buy an apple or another grocery store and buy an apple, it's all apples to me. However, if I go to one personal trainer and then I go to another one, there's a big opportunity to differentiate yourself and not be a commodity item. And that starts with community, and it starts with you being resourceful and, again, respectful of your talents as the reason why they're showing up, not the equipment. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is managing your expenses, and I wrote level 1 next to it, where it's just you. You get all these fantasies in your head, and oh, did I have them too? Like, I could just get 100 members paying me $100 each, and at the end I can make $120,000 a year, quit my teaching job, buy new houses, and it'd be set up for life. Well, as you creep towards the 100 mark, you're learning how to manage your expenses. Your marketing expense then creeps in. Then you're starting to think, well, maybe I need another trainer, maybe I need a little help, and you start to get to level 2 management when you're thinking about those bigger expenses. But at the very beginning, you get a lot of simple fixed costs. You buy that one barbell, then you don't have to pay for it again, regardless of how many people use it. You buy that rack, you buy that equipment, you buy the flooring, and it's just you and your labor going into it a lot of times. So you learn how to manage the expenses, and then you start to get more respect for saying, you know what, making $100,000 at this gym isn't going to be enough for me to accomplish the freedom I want, because at $100,000, now you got to start taking out the expenses and upkeep. You have to start taking out your own insurance. You start doing the math, and you start wanting that freedom, which we'll talk about in future podcasts. You start wanting that freedom and that desire to live life and be an entrepreneur as well as a trainer. And you understand that's going to take hiring some people and building up expenses. And if you hire someone that's $40,000 or $50,000 that just took your 100 and cut it in half, now you're paying your other expenses, and that number is getting smaller and smaller. But here's what I wanted you to leave today's podcast with. Number 1, be resourceful when you first open up your facility. And if you're already a gym owner listening to this, Well, you probably are only already a gym owner. That's why you're listening to this. Put value in your own personal skills and abilities above and beyond equipment. If you're not more valuable than equipment, spend more time on personal development to become so. That is something that you really need. The second lesson, community engagement. Focus on asking for referrals and just don't wait for it to happen. And the last thing is learn how to manage your basic expenses and what we call fixed costs, items that you purchase once. Everything in your original gym that I made in that garage was a fixed cost. Regardless of how many people came in and worked out on it, I paid the same for it. Now, when you get into your own facilities and you get into electricity bills and part-time labor based on how many sessions they're doing, you get into variable costs. And we'll do a deep dive onto these more complex topics with their own individual podcasts. But I want you to leave today thinking about how to be more resourceful, thinking about how to deepen your community and your personal skills, and thinking about how you're going to manage your fixed costs a little bit better in the next year. If you enjoy these tips, please do give this podcast a rating. I'm going to try to keep these to about 10 minutes. And if you have any suggestions or questions, I am all ears. I would love to do a question and answer podcast coming up soon. And again, your resources from us, levelupyourgym.com. It is a free video series, like a gym business masterclass sent to your inbox every morning. So make sure to check that out. And I'm excited to talk to you on the next one.